Well, it's been 2 years since House of the Dragon's disastrous second season, and we're back for yet more Westeros TV. Season 3 has just wrapped up, and it's time to evaluate just how good, or bad, House of the Dragon's penultimate season is. So let's get started. Back in 2024, Season 2 kind of ended abruptly without any sort of conclusion. So, instead of starting normally, Season 3 is forced to begin right in the middle of the action, which I honestly found quite jarring and confusing. Like, it's pretty obvious that the first 2 episodes of Season 3 really should have been the last 2 episodes of Season 2. They would have made last season less boring and this season more comprehensible. But instead, nope, you're just thrust straight into the action with the naval battle of the Gullet. Now, I've seen quite a few people really bigging up this battle sequence, saying it's amazing and one of the best ever put to TV, and honestly, I just don't get it. So the episode begins with some hasty exposition, trying to explain what's actually going on, before we then cut away to the big battle itself, which didn't seem that impressive to me. There was very little build-up, and instead we just moved straight into CGI ships slamming into each other and random people shouting. Like, who even are these people? Pirates? Remember, it's been 2 years since the last season, and they just expect you to understand exactly what's going on. Now, that's fine for me as someone who has read the book and is generally very interested in Westeros lore. But if I wasn't, then I'd be utterly confused as to what's going on. Anyway, the Velaryon fleet is led by the Sea Snake and that bald guy, and they face off against a pirate fleet led by Philosophy Tube? Like, why? To be honest, just seeing this character takes me out of the immersion. Like, how am I supposed to take a YouTuber seriously in this role? Now, apparently this pirate leader has some long-standing rivalry with the Sea Snake, and so she basically screws up the entire battle plan to go on some cringy pursuit. This supposed rivalry just seems really out of the blue to me. Indeed, I don't think these two characters have ever even shared a scene together. I cannot even remember if they've even mentioned each other before. But we're just supposed to accept that they are like mortal, age-old enemies. Like, okay, I guess. The battle then disintegrates into a CGI smash-up, with a pursuit scene that honestly felt like a cheap pirate movie. I mean, if Euron Greyjoy from Game of Thrones was a budget version of his book counterpart, then this pirate lady is a budget version of Show Euron, which really isn't saying much. Anyway, this random pirate then has a duel with the bald guy and dies. Like, okay. Both of them are pretty shallow characters, with basically no screen time and no characterization. I felt absolutely nothing when she died. Perhaps the most important development in this episode was the death of Rhaenyra's son and heir, Jace. Now, I had nothing against the lad, he seemed to have his head screwed on, broadly. But I'm going to be honest here, the writers really didn't spend much time developing him as a character. He basically just serves as an object of Rhaenyra's attention, like a glorified scene prop. He was, I'm afraid to say, a bit of an NPC, with basically no personal life. He was defined entirely through his relationship with his mother. So when I saw people saying that his death was as shocking and emotional as the death of Robb Stark from Game of Thrones, I was honestly dumbfounded. Like, are you serious? Robb was a detailed, complicated character. Jace basically existed in this show to interact with Rhaenyra. Now, to be honest, I really cannot be bothered to go through every episode of the show like this, so I'll just outline the major problems that make this season, and the show generally, so disappointing. By far the largest problem is the writing. George R.R. Martin has already come out to say that this show is no longer telling his story, and that's plain to see. Ryan Condal and Sarah Hess are intent on telling their own version of the Dance of the Dragons, and, to be blunt, their version is pretty bad. This season, like last season, Rhaenyra is turned from a complicated woman into this simplistic, one-dimensional character who can basically do no wrong. In the books, after taking King's Landing, she raises taxes to help fill the empty treasury. However, this provokes major discontent amongst the small folk. Makes sense, right? But Condal and Hess clearly don't want to damage the reputation of their darling Rhaenyra. So instead, they have her basically do the opposite, and instead tax the rich to hand out food to the people. Instead of Rhaenyra's own failures, the disorder in King's Landing is depicted as the work of Ormond Hightower. Thus, Rhaenyra emerges as a heroine who can do no wrong, and the problems of the realm are the result of the actions of the heedless men who surround her. Rhaenyra emerges as an indecisive victim of men. Instead, she spends her time having lesbian sex with Mysaria, who's basically a dollar store version of Varys. Meanwhile, the character of Nettles is removed entirely from the show, replaced by Daemon's daughter Rhaena. Why? Nettles was an interesting character, and her relationship with Daemon was pretty fascinating. Why would they just axe it completely? The answer? Because Condal and Hess are writing their own bad fanfiction, and, to use their words, they want Daemon and Rhaenyra's relationship to work out. That's just totally the wrong attitude. You should aim to tell a great story, not pander to the audience. By that logic, the Red Wedding should never have happened, because the fans wanted to see Robb and Jane Westerling's romance work out. Perhaps the biggest victim of Condal and Hess's terrible writing is Miss Hightower. We ended last season with Hightower betraying her own family for the sake of her former childhood friend, and in this season, the Dowager Queen doubles down. She tricks her son Aemond into leaving the city before committing treason by admitting their enemies into the Red Keep. Her father is then beheaded before her very eyes at the hand of Rhaenyra. Now you might think, surely this is the moment Hightower turns against her childhood friend. Nope, she seems to hardly care about it. In the next episode, she seems generally unbothered by her father's murder and mentions it like once. She then tries to escape by forcing her daughter to leave her little daughter, Jaehaera, behind. And then, when she learns she is pregnant, she tries desperately to force Helaena to kill the baby, even though she doesn't want to. Then, in the ultimate betrayal, Rhaenyra sends Hightower to Harrenhal to murder her own son Aemond, and she just accepts it, and off she goes. She arrives in Harrenhal and then poisons her own son, even as he looks at her with trust and love in his eyes. Like, seriously, what happened to this character? Why did Condal and Hess turn her into an utter psychopath? Do they think this makes her look sympathetic? This is a massive divergence from the book, but worse than that, it is a massive divergence from who Hightower was established to be in Season 1 of this show. Back in Season 1, she was established as a deeply loving mother who would do anything to protect her family. She even tried to kill Rhaenyra after her son was attacked, and, in Episode 9, she puts herself in front of Aegon when he was threatened by Rhaenys. In other words, she was willing to kill and to die for her boys. Now, however, she is a murdering psychopath who is happy to slaughter them in order to please Rhaenyra. Like, are you serious? Is this the same person? Did she get hit on the head? Or has the real Hightower been killed and this is some fake imposter? It's utterly insane. This brings me on to the second major problem with this show, and it's a problem that has continued since Season 2. Basically, aside from a handful of major characters, it just feels like most of the side characters in this show are NPCs, background fillers who exist purely to interact with the main characters and fulfill plot points. Side characters like Roddy the Ruin get like 1 minute of screen time and aren't even properly introduced half of the time. Like, I reckon most viewers will conclude that Roddy is a Stark, but he's not. The example I usually give to illustrate the shallow nature of the side characters in this show is Jane Arryn. Yes, she is very pretty, but she simply isn't as developed as a character in her own right. Like, who is she? Who is her father? Does she have a husband? Does she have any children? Any siblings? No idea. Does she have any enemies? Any rivals? What does she want? What are her goals? Does she have any unique personality elements? No idea. She just exists to help other characters fulfill plot points. Like, compare her to Lysa Arryn from Game of Thrones. In her very first scene, Lysa received more characterization than Jane Arryn has in the past 2 seasons. The simple fact is that she and most of the minor characters in this show are boring, shallow characters who exist purely in the background. This ends up making the whole world of Westeros feel much more lifeless and fake, in my opinion. Finally, there is also the element of the race swapping. At first, I was generally fine with the race swapping of the Velaryon family. At least there was some explanations given, namely that they are foreigners to Westeros, and it helps to distinguish them from the Targaryens. But now, it just feels like it's becoming a bit much. You can kind of understand that King's Landing, the major trade hub that is, would have some diversity. But we are introduced this season to the rural market town of Tumbleton, and honestly, it looks as diverse as 21st century London. Now, I'm going to be honest, this damages the immersion for me. It feels less like medieval Europe and more like modern New York. Now, are there any positives about this season? Yes, there are. It's less boring than last season, and generally speaking, the actors and actresses do a fine job with the material they are given to work with. I particularly enjoyed the scenes involving Aegon, Tywin Lannister, and Larys Strong. Likewise, Ormond Hightower was fun to watch, and the memes and TikTok edits about him were likewise enjoyable. Finally, I just cannot help but feel like the show is moving too slowly. Too much time is wasted on characters that don't deserve it. Meanwhile, there is only one more season left, and yet there is so much that needs to happen. I have a nasty feeling that season 4 is going to be really rushed, on top of having bad writing. But anyway, that's 2 years away now, so let's just wait and see.